The one thing that I believe would work everywhere is fighting. Because it doesn't matter what color you are, what country you come from, or what language you speak. We're all human beings, and fighting's in our DNA, man. We get it and we like it.
Let's start off, let's recap, let's just do a quick canter through Fight Night 157. Now, a lot of people, including myself, I've got to, put my hand firmly up in the camp of Jessica Andrade. I expected her to go in there and to blitz and basically to make light work of Zhang Weili. Mm-hmm. And just whilst we're on Zhang Weili, a lot of people have been calling her Weili Zhang. I actually looked this up because, there did seem to be a mixture in terms of tweets. People were calling her Weili Zhang, people were calling her Zhang Weili.
That people would be me. I call her Weili Zhang.
Well, you know something? I learned that you actually say the surname first, before the first name. So it's surname first and first name last. It's Zhang Weili. But anyway, going back to Zhang Weili, no one, I don't care, unless, you're G from Woe TV. A lot of people online were saying, I knew this. I knew this was actually going to be forthcoming. I did not see that coming. And it was shocking. That Thai plum clinch, those strikes, those elbows
brutal,
were vicious, ferocious. I mean, seeing as though you actually called it, you had Zhang Weili actually winning. What was it that gave you that foresight? What was it that gave you that mystic, Nostradamus moment?
Well, I will admit that I thought Zhang Weili, say it correctly now, Zhang Weili was going to win, but I did not anticipate a KO in 42 seconds. That I did not see. I thought maybe she was good. I just thought she was the better fighter. And when I watched old footage of her, then I looked at her record, I was just like, I think Jessica's in trouble here, because Jessica is a great fighter, but she also has very obvious holes and flaws in her game. She comes forward each and every fight. Yes, she can slam you. Yes, she throws these hard hooks, but people like Joanna, they have exposed the fact that footwork works against Jessica Andrade, and Rose showed us the same thing. It's all about the footwork. And that's what Zhang Weili has. She doesn't do a lot of head movement, but her footwork is on point. And if you watch the fight again, Michael, in the 42 seconds, this woman was able to just hit so many different angles, get out of the way, and counter her perfectly and beautifully. Why? Because of footwork. And that always works against Jessica Andrade, because she comes forward and does the same thing, and she hits hard. And yes, she can slam you, but you can figure her out. And I'm pretty sure that Zhang Weili did her homework, and then she's already really good at moving. And then she's strong as fuck. I just had a feeling she was just going to handle her business. I just didn't expect it in 42 seconds. I was shocked.
Wow.
I was shocked. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was about to say, well done you then, because there are very few people like yourself who are going with Zhang Weili, and the majority of people like myself, considering, Jessica Andrade's striking prowess,
she's
given
good.
the caliber, given the fact that, she is a phenomenal athlete.
Absolutely.
I don't think many people were with you when they were actually picking the fight.
And she also has, Jessica Andrade, has the best KO in that division. She knocked out Carolina, I call her KK, can't say the last name, but Carolina, the young lady from Poland, she knocked her out brutally and knocked that mouthpiece right out her mouth. And, it's biased. We know Jessica, we're familiar with her, we know how she fights, and she's really good. Like, she is top 5, she's elite. And she's also the champion. She slammed Thug Rose. So she's pretty legit, so I don't have a problem with anybody picking her. It was just that I was just concerned with Zhang's footwork is just remarkable, and I just know that that doesn't work for Jessica. But let me ask you a question about this fight. What do you think about the elbows that Zhang Weili was able to hit her with? A lot of people online complained that those elbows were illegal. I don't agree, but I wanted to get your point of view on those elbows.
100% legal. It looked as though they were connecting at the point just below her ear. And okay, the camera angle that I was actually looking from, because I replayed it over and over, because just like yourself, I saw a lot of online chatter, a lot of
Yeah, I did.
online disturbance over the fact that, a lot of people did feel as though, Jessica Andrade had been the subject to illegal elbows. But I personally thought that they were legal.
I did
I
too.
personally thought that they were precise, and it looked like something that you would drill. So these weren't wayward. They weren't actually, what's the word I'm looking for? They weren't reckless.
Right.
They were precise, and I would say that's definitely something she would be drilling.
Yeah, and I think the elbows, some of them landed on the ear, which is legal. I also think people need to realize too that these elbows have to be intentional. That's also part of the rules, that they need to be intentional. They were not intentional. And when you're doing standing elbows and you're throwing them and that person moves, sometimes you hit the back of the head because that person moved, and that's not your intention, so you can't be held fault for that. And if you watch the video, the ref did kind of say, hey, watch it, which is part of his job. So I don't have a problem with the elbows at all. And guess who else doesn't have a problem with the elbows? Jessica Andrade has not publicly stated any complaints about the elbows whatsoever. And she's not, I haven't heard that she's going to appeal the fight either. So it's just...
And what I liked about Jessica Andrade as well, the way in which she lost, that was just like textbook how you actually
take a loss.
Respect your fellow opponent, because there wasn't any protestation that she could have try and like wrangled out of it by saying it was illegal. No, it just seemed like there was like utmost respect, and I like the way in which she was congratulatory after the fight as well, and there wasn't any grimacing, there wasn't any storming off. I like the way she handled her loss. That was like, that's how a champion should actually react, and that's how a champion should act.
Absolutely, it was a champion's reaction to a loss, and I have a lot of I have a lot of respect for her. And she's already talking about a rematch, which I don't agree with just yet. I think Jessica Andrade needs to just maybe tweak that come forward style that can be exploited, and then make her way back up with some type of new style where she's maybe picking her shots more but still landing with power. I think once she keeps coming forward, it's a recipe to beat her, and she's got to address that. And once she does that, she'll be back on top again. She'll be a monster, I think.
Unless it was actually written into her contract that she would get a direct rematch.
I wonder.
I personally don't feel that it warrants one. One,
no,
because she was beaten in the first round. Two, it was an emphatic victory. But three, I mean, really and truly, it didn't actually go to decision. It's not as though we saw something which was a close run thing. So where's the controversy? I personally feel as though, the way in which she handled it is something that she'll bounce back from and come back stronger. I don't think that, really and truly, given how swiftly she was dispatched, I don't feel it warrants an immediate rematch.
And I also think the
title shot or not.
No, I totally agree with you on this one. And I also think that the UFC has a new market in China. They're going to want to throw some new faces at her and whatnot. And I could honestly see them giving her the winner of JJ or Michelle Waterson, or maybe even Tatiana Suarez. They're going to want to shake things up. They're going to want to see some new faces and people that want to see them fight Zhang, and I could see the UFC taking advantage of that. I don't think they're going to want to run back Jessica Andrade right away, and Zhang has quite a career ahead of her, because she just got this title shot out of nowhere, and now she has to defend it with the elite of the division. Everybody else kind of worked their way into title contention and then tried to either fought the champ or became the champ. She's champ right away with one fight. And then now she's got to defend her title against all the monsters out there. So it's going to be a pretty interesting career for her. And I look forward to seeing how she handles it, because she does seem like a beast,
100%. And I have to say, it was a very calculated risk by the UFC to actually, have the title shot in China. And, speaking of calculated risks, I think that's a nice point at which to introduce this week's guest, which is Chase the Teenage Dream Hooper. How you doing, Chase?
Good, just enjoying the weather out here while it lasts. Summer's kind of getting ready to end.
Well, that's one thing for sure. You've certainly heated up the end of the summer. I mean, that is some feat actually coming into the UFC at 19 years of age, the youngest entrant to the UFC. But to those who are actually quite familiar with the name Chase Hooper, they would have seen you on the Dana White's Tuesday Contenders. Now, I think it was felt at the time by Dana White that you weren't quite ready. I mean, at that time, given how much you'd actually put in and given that, to a certain extent on the regional scene, you'd paid your dues, how hard was that to actually hear that?
I think everybody kind of wants to go for like the full contract, like the full deal like that. But getting the developmental deal after my fight was definitely the best, like for myself career wise. Like it gave me a little more time to work on what I needed to like fix striking wise and like getting more comfortable, getting more fights. Because after that, I only had 6 pro fights. Now I'm up to 9. So that definitely helped out. And then with the developmental stuff, I was in contact with the UFC the whole time. They were helping me set up the fights like all through Fight Pass. And I was getting to do more media stuff. So it's getting me more used to the stuff that I'll need to do once I make my debut in the UFC. So I thought that was great.
So when we talk about a developmental deal, they're actually stewarding your career into the UFC, right?
Yeah, so I actually had a standard UFC contract. So I was making what any standard UFC fighter would make on their first couple fights in the UFC. I had access to all the UFC facilities, like the Performance Institute. They actually gave me a diet plan for a couple of my fights to make weight and everything and like rehydration stuff. But we're in contact with them the whole time. Right after my last fight actually was when we got offered a fight in the UFC. So I've been kind of sitting on that for a while.
So when you say we, I take it you've got management. Who are you represented by at the moment?
Right now it's just me and my coach who are doing like all the paperwork stuff, and it's worked out great. I mean, the UFC likes me, so I don't think right now I need to do too much to stand out. It seems like they want me to do well, so I don't think I quite need a management team yet.
Okay, I mean, just looking at your background, it seems, well, from the digging I've done so far, it seems pretty clean cut. You seem to have had a pretty decent upbringing. It looks as though you stayed clear of trouble. I mean, have I missed anything in actually doing the background check on Chase Hooper?
No. No, it's pretty standard. Like I just kind of focused on training. I spent my whole childhood pretty much just in the gym. And yeah, it just got me here. Just staying on the straight and narrow and kind of focusing on what I wanted to do.
You see, that was one of the things that kind of intrigued me. I mean, obviously at your young age, usually, young adults of your age are out partying, getting wild. So what actually kept you focused? What kept you on the straight and narrow? What kept your eyes on the prize, as it were?
I didn't have too much confidence, so I didn't really feel confidence with going out and partying. So I just kind of, stayed where I felt comfortable, and that was the gym. And I kept doing well as far as like tournaments and stuff for grappling and like smokers. So it just kind of made me want to keep training more. And then, I just kept going down that path.
And, talking about that path, what was it? What was the catalyst? What was the inspiration to actually say, you know what, MMA is where it's at? Because, if you don't mind me saying, for, again, someone of your age, your focus, I have to say, is one of the standout traits in terms of your character, but also just drawing inspiration from, people around you. I'm just intrigued as to what actually led you to MMA.
So it all kind of started initially training. Like my dad and my coach worked together. It was around the 2008 when there was like some financial trouble. So they both got laid off from their jobs, and my coach opened his gym, and my dad brought me in there. So I just started training with him, and that was probably 2000, yeah, like 2008, 2009. And I want to say 2010, he made his debut in the UFC, and he fought in there for a couple years. So he was probably my main inspiration as far as like seeing that as being achievable with living like in a small town like I do. And yeah, I just kind of stuck with it. My family's not super well off, so I kind of knew that college wasn't really in the question as far as that goes. And I just kind of loved the sport of it. And yeah, it just kind of, took off from there.
Okay, so your coach was actually in the UFC. I mean, just talk me through your coach's journey. How did he fare?
He came into the UFC a little late, and the way that I see it for a lot of guys, it's kind of like sink or swim if they don't really have any vested interest in you. And he was kind of one of those guys where they gave him a lot of tough fights, and he won some, lost some, and then they kind of like cut him. I want to say he had like 3 or 4 fights in the UFC. But yeah, he was kind of older, and he was older at the time, at least for a fighter. He was kind of in his 30s, so they weren't quite looking to keep him as an investment, so it was a little more sink or swim. But definitely it was cool to be like in the middle of that as a kid, like growing up, especially in a small town.
Now already I'm kind of like, forgive me if I'm barking at the wrong tree here, and forgive me if I've in terms of personality traits going down the wrong road here, but I already see that you look and survey the land in terms of what's gone on before, and you look to either do better or to avoid the pitfalls. The nearest reference I've got to you would be someone like a Sage Northcutt, who, was picked up quite early, was picked up basically and seen as, for want of a better word, a prospect, a golden child in terms of the UFC. In terms of his journey, I'm not saying that there are definite parallels between yours and his, only in terms of the young age in which he entered the UFC. But in terms of his journey, what do you think that you've learned just observing what he's gone through?
I think he kind of got pushed too hard too quick. He maybe took some fights that he wasn't quite ready for, and that's kind of why he only had a couple years. I think what would be best for my career would be to like go slow, not necessarily try to fight top 10 guys right off the bat. Like start slow, work my way up. Kind of just like a slow journey through the division, just taking out all these guys, and then continually upping my skill set, like my maturity, physical maturity more, and just like kind of getting me ready to have those harder fights. Because if you jump into the top 10, all these guys have like 20, 30 fights, and I have, almost 10.
Which kind of like leads us neatly into December 14th, when you'll be making your proper UFC debut on UFC 245, right?
Yep.
Now, in making that debut, first of all, have you been given a name? And more importantly, what challenges do you feel as though you'll be stepping into the cage when you actually meet this person?
I do have the name. They kind of they want to be the ones to announce it. But he's more of a striker. He's a shorter guy for the division, so it'll be good for me to see if I can work my reach against him. He's more of a stand-up guy, so I'm gonna use my grappling to get him to the ground, use my striking to keep him uncomfortable, and try to submit him or TKO him, whatever comes first. I'm definitely a grappler, so if he comes into the fight expecting something else, he's not done his research right. So it should be kind of pretty apparent what I'm gonna go out there and try to do. Just like I know he's a striker, so he's gonna try to knock my head off. I mean.
Now, when you say, obviously, I'm not asking you to name the opponent, but is it someone that we would have all heard of, or is this again a newcomer just like yourself in terms of like developmental prowess and steps forward in the UFC? Is this someone that we've heard of before, or is this someone completely new to the UFC?
I want to say that he's like 2-1 in the or I'm sorry, 1-2 in the UFC. So he's had some fights, but he's like won some, lost some. So a good like starter guy for me.
Fantastic. So I'm just curious. You've obviously been surveying the land. You know exactly what your path is going to be, but you must have picked out some, routes to where you actually want to get to. And I take it, obviously, one day that's the belt. But you've obviously got your eye on some key individuals. Do you want to name drop a few of those people who you feel would be a really good matchup? Not now, obviously, but in the near future.
We're actually getting ready to like sit down and kind of look at the division as a whole to kind of do something like that where we can kind of pick out guys that we want. But I guess the basic template would be either guys that are like mainly strikers with not a lot of ground, or other guys that are mainly ground. I'd like to either show that I'm a much better grappler than everybody else, or just use my grappling to take care of everybody else's striking. Just kind of more the people that aren't as well rounded or aren't just gonna wrestle and like sit there and like hit. Because those guys are more in for boring fights. I want like fun fights.
Fantastic. Just before you go, I'm intrigued as to your take on obviously this weekend's action. I'm just intrigued as to who you've got between Khabib Nurmagomedov and Dustin Poirier. Who are you picking?
I think the safe bet would be Khabib, but I'm gonna hope that, you know, as an American, that Poirier will pull it off. Just could have a little bit of bias there. I think that'd be cool.
I got excited to hear such a young person be this dedicated to his craft and this focused. I mean, he didn't sound like a teenager. And I don't care what you say, 19 is a teenager. I was once 19. I was young and dumb. And Chase doesn't sound like that, you know? It sounds like he's been doing this for a very long time. So after I heard the interview, I went on YouTube and I went crazy and I watched some fights. And I watched some amateur fights. These fights were so old, he looked like a baby in there. And then I didn't even know what, I'm so serious. I didn't know what organization I was watching. It looked nuts. But let me tell you something, it was impressive. This kid's a grappling ace, and I'm excited for his debut. And I pray the UFC develops him properly while he's in the UFC, not just, you know, in the developmental program. Now that he's in the big times, I also want him to be developed in the UFC as well. Like, don't put him with the sharks, please.
You see, that's why I was really keen to get his take on, you know, the nearest comparison I could really think of whilst we were speaking, whilst, you know, I was interviewing him, was Sage Northcutt. And, you know, it was intriguing and it's quite telling in terms of how he saw himself and Sage Northcutt, and Sage Northcutt's very short run when you think about it in relative terms in the UFC, and it looks as though he won't be repeating that. It's clear that he's got it mapped out in his head how he sees his contract playing out. It's clear that he won't be rushed. And again,
Thank
just
God.
from the hints in terms of his first opponent in the UFC, I think it will be a very, very, a slow process, a slower process than was afforded to Sage Northcutt anyway.
I know, because when he mentioned like the hints about the opponent, I immediately went into the rankings and tried to figure it out who it was, but I couldn't figure it out. But what I will tell you is that I did watch an amateur fight with him, and I'm not a jiu-jitsu practitioner, but I've watched a lot of jiu-jitsu, and he pulled off something called like the pendulum a pendulum sweep in one of his amateur fights, and that's basically like he swept somebody with one leg without a gi on, which was so impressive to
Wow.
me. Thank you. Which was so impressive to get the kids
Yeah.
back and then put him to sleep with a rear naked choke. I recognized it right away. It's hard for me to articulate it because I don't train in it, but when I'm watching it, I can see it. You know what I mean? So I wish I could articulate it better. But I was like, oh my God, he's like 16 pulling off a pendulum sweep. And anyone that listens to jiu-jitsu, any of our listeners, they know what this is. And it's quite impressive for someone to pull that off so young. And I'm like, he's a baby doing a sweep like this? My God. And then he goes in the developmental, the program in the UFC. The difference between him and Sage is that I feel like he's a grappling ace, but he's also been working on his striking and his stand-up. I just feel like Sage kind of showed up with no grappling in his back pocket. Like he didn't work on it enough. And I feel like this kid's got the upper hand when it comes to. I don't think he's as inexperienced as Sage Northcourt as a mixed martial artist. And I really look forward to seeing what he can do. And I think you're right. They sound like they're going to match him up with somebody that is on his skill level. And I look forward to that. I don't want an Aaron Pico situation here. He's too young.
Oh, definitely. I mean, speaking of Aaron Pico, it's a nice and timely segue into Bellator 226, Beta versus Congo, which is obviously Bellator being the home now of Aaron Pico. But Beta versus Congo, I have to say, not only is the opportunity for Cheick Congo to try and grab Ryan Bader's belt, the heavyweight belt, but it also kicks off the Bellator lightweight Grand Prix. Now, I know there are some serious killers on this particular card, particularly, Pat Curran, Emmanuel Sanchez. I mean, you name it, looking up and down the actual card.
Adam
and
Borics.
looking at those who are actually, who are participating in the actual Grand Prix. This is an incredible lineup. But for me, I'm going to be paying particular attention. Firstly, to Daniel Strauss, who I really want to actually win the Grand Prix, only because, when you think about it, it wasn't too long ago that, Daniel Strauss was learning to walk after a near fatal accident. Now, when you think about what the doctor's prognosis was when he was actually on the road to recovery, the fact that he is now in the lightweight Grand Prix, on his way possibly to, winning $1 million, that is nothing short of a miracle.
I mean, that would be a hell of a story and a fairy tale. That would be wonderful for him. What a comeback story for a doctor to tell you you'll never walk again, and then later on down the road you're winning $1 million in a mixed martial arts contest. I mean, unbelievable. I'm rooting for him as well. I hope I like stories like that, and I think it's good for business too. It's good for promotions and Bellator to promote something positive as well. You don't always have to be a heel. Sometimes real life stories and comeback stories of people being injured, and even Frank Mir with his motorcycle accident and people coming back and still fighting. Those are feel good stories, Oh,
100%.
And they're real.
100%.
They're authentic. There's nothing to make up. There's no suits to wear. There's no magicians. There's none of that cringe crap. It's just a feel good story. This guy fought his way back and now he's entertaining us again. I mean, if he wins, can you imagine? Awesome.
It would be incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about fairy tale ending.
Yeah. And it's good for business. I also think of the business side of like promoting things as well. And you can promote the hell out of that. People like that. People like positivity. Don't sleep, even though people like heels and Kobe and stuff like that. People still like happy endings,
Yeah. I mean, I did allude to the fact that there were, in particular, two individuals that I'm going to be keeping a very close eye on. The other person being, even though he's not part of the Featherweight Grand Prix, is England's own Ashley Grimshaw, who will be competing in the featherweight division, but against John McCapper. Now, I've got to admit, Ashley Grimshaw has had a rather long layoff, and I'm worried that this might be a little bit of a step up, considering, John McCapper's caliber, and given who he's fought in the past. I mean, when you look at his record, it's almost like a who's who. I mean, he's been in there with AJ McKee. He's been in there with Pat Curran. He's been in there
wow.
with Daniel Weichel. Now,
Okay.
albeit that he's come up short, those are still some killers.
No,
to
it's
have
fight
actually,
experience.
Come in.
Yeah. Look at his record.
Come in with a
22-4. I'm looking at
What's
it.
that?
Look at his record. 22-4. That's not bad,
yeah.
Michael.
I mean, when you look at those, apart from AJ McKee Jr., who he lost to via KO in round 1. I mean, Pat Curran, he took him to a decision, and that was a unanimous decision, but still took Pat Curran to a decision. And similarly with Daniel Weichel, he took him to a split decision. Now, I have to say, as I say, because of the long layoff of Ashley Grimshaw,
You're nervous.
I'm very, thank you. You took the
You're
words right
nervous.
out of my mouth. I'm nervous for Ashley Grimshaw, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed that he does actually come home with the victory.
Well, some people are not affected by ring rust. I've heard Dominic Cruz talk about this before. He came back years later and just smoked his opponent. There are some. Nate Diaz came back just recently. It's been 3 years. He put on an awesome performance and even had to face adversity while fighting Anthony Pettis. He came out with the W. So don't get, anything can happen in this game. So I understand that you're nervous, but you never know Ashley's mindset, You never know what he's getting into here. So I'm rooting for him, though. It sounds like he's a little bit of the underdog, so I'm going to go for him.
Which neatly leads us on to UFC 242. I mean, really and truly, this has come round very, very quickly. Khabib Nurmagomedov will clash Dustin Poirier in Abu Dhabi. Now, I have to admit, apart from Edson Barboza and Paul Felder, the rest of the main card is very much kind of like, meh, okay.
Yeah, I could see that.
Just before we break down the main card and give our predictions, I've got my eye quite firmly fixed on a new entrant to the UFC's roster, and that's Lerone the Miracle Murphy. Now, his backstory is one which is very, very interesting. It's quite fascinating. I think it was several years back, before he was making waves in mixed martial arts, he got shot in the face. I think it was in the neck, in a street altercation. Now, albeit the way that he describes it, he was doing things that he shouldn't have been doing. I should also preface this by saying that he's very, very close friends with Kane Musa, as you know, a good friend of mine. And if you know Kane Musa's backstory, you'll also know that he used to run with the street gangs before he was incarcerated. So I've got a feeling that connection runs quite deep there. But given that he effectively dodged death when you think about it, I mean, being shot in the neck obviously is no fun, and it's a life-threatening situation to find yourself in. Literally, the name that he's taken, the Miracle, is such an apt one, because it is a miracle that in 2019, not only has he found his way to fighting in the UFC, but he's managed to actually, dodge street activity.
Oh, yeah, then that's another story we like to hear. Who doesn't like to hear somebody that has been through it, made the wrong decisions in life, got shot in the face or the neck, and then comes back and gets a UFC contract? And then look at this guy's record. I mean, he has 5 wins in a row. Of course he's going to the UFC. You know what I mean? He's 5-0. So he's ready But what you think?
But that's just it. Let's just pump the brakes ever so slightly, and let me not get too hyped up on Lerone Murphy. I mean, like I say, I'm pleased that he's managed to dodge bullets. I mean, literally and figuratively, on the streets. But He's in there, first of all, with Zabara Tukagov. Now, when you think about it, this guy is no slouch. We will remember that this is the guy that Dana White said will never fight in the UFC again because of the altercation which happened a cage side. And indeed, in the cage, when he jumped the fence and
he went after
assaulted
Dylan
Conor
Dennis,
McGregor. But
and Connor.
The fact is, Tukogov is a certified killer.
Ooh.
Now,
no easy fights in the UFC.
Exactly, it's a baptism of fire. Now, as I say, why I say pump the brakes. When you look at the regional circuit from which Lerone Murphy has actually come from, as much as I want to get behind Lerone Murphy, it should be really noted that most of his fights has been on the smaller regional promotion, and I think we need to be ever so slightly mindful of the fact that there is obviously a marked difference between the regional scene and winning on the regional scene and actually, going into the UFC against, certified G's like Tukogov.
Well, now you have me nervous. Now I'm the nervous one. Because you're absolutely right. I mean, these guys from Dagestan and then hang out with Khabib, they're just really on a whole nother level. You know what I mean? Even in
100%.
Even in loss, they go down in battle. Do you know what I mean? They train differently from the Americans and other folks that, the UK, of course, and they train differently from folks, and their mindset is different. Their traditions, their values, everything is different about them. So they're really, really focused, and a lot of them are very, very talented. And look who they train with, Khabib, So he's definitely got his hands full, but he's in the UFC for a reason, and you don't get easy fights. So, he's going to have to step it up. And and like I said, I'm going to say it again, it's the fight game. You never know what's going to happen,
Exactly.
I look forward to this as well. It's a lot of them,
Yeah, and apparently that's the curtain jerker just before the main event, main card. And speaking of main card, kicking off the main card is Marbek Tassinov versus Carlos Diego Ferreira. I'm going to just come out and say this. I really do believe that this main card is predominantly made up of people who are essentially showcasing the best of, Russian talent.
Absolutely.
And I really do feel it's kind of tailored towards the audience who are going to be in attendance. And I really do feel that this is going to be, a walk in the park for Marbek Tassinov to actually take on Carlos Diego Ferreira.
I think so too. I think we agree on, so we're starting to agree already early in the show. But yes, I think Marbek is going to run through this guy. And I totally agree. I'm going to piggyback off your words. This is a showcase for Russian MMA. And it's quite obvious by all these matchups. Because being in Abu Dhabi is almost like being home, It's almost a home advantage. They are going to be pro-Russia in this crowd. And it should be a lot of fun. But on board, I would say that he's going to have his way with Diego, and I think he wins this easily. Maybe, I don't know about knockout, he can do it, and he's well-rounded, so it can be a knockout, It can be a submission, and Diego's going to put up a hell of a fight, I think, but either way, Marbek is getting it done,
100%.
Yeah.
Similarly, the matchup between Curtis Blades and Shamil Abudakimov. I see, Shamil coming again away with a victory. You only have to look at the records. Now, I know records are for DJs, but Shamil is coming in with 24-0, and Curtis Blades is 11-2-0. And I just think, again, it's a showcase. So I'm going with Shamil. Again, when you look at Islam Makhachev and Davi Ramos, I've got a... actually... Skirt. I didn't ask you.
Hold up.
Curtis Blades.
Right. You rolling. I'm sitting here over here listening. I'm like, uh-huh. I'm glad you caught it. I was like, speak on, brother. I'm with you.
Yeah.
I'm going to differ with you on Curtis Blades and Shamil. I think Curtis has his way with him. I know that his record 20-4, but I'm going I'm going to contradict you on this one, and I think Curtis uses his wrestling. I think he's got the momentum with him right now. And I'll be honest, too, I don't know too much about Shamil, so this is a little bit of bias on my part. But I think Curtis gets it done, and Curtis is in that groove right now. He wants that title shot. He wants his name in the mix. And I'm going to put my money on Curtis Blades. And I like his wrestling. I think it's pretty legit.
Okay. Islam Makachev and Davi Ramos. I'm going for Islam Makachev only again because the guy is a certified killer, so I'm going with him only because of in terms of caliber when you compare him to Davi Ramos.
Oh, same. And again, they're showcasing Russian athletes, and let's just hope like this doesn't backfire and the Russian athletes just have an off night, because the UFC does do that. They'll put a whole card in like Brazil or somebody's backyard, and then like the whole country loses. So let's hope this doesn't happen. But I'm with you on that. I think Islam takes it. I think it's going to be a fun fight. But same as before, I think he's aggressive, comes forward, he's nasty, you know what I mean? So I'm going to put my money on him, and I think he takes it. It's a Russian showcase. I look forward to it, though. I'm excited about this Russian showcase. I think these guys are built for war, and I know a lot of people don't like this card or they're not familiar with these folks, but I think after this fight, some people are. They're gonna have some people on their radar, and I think that's pretty cool. But I'm going with Islam officially.
Okay, and breaking up the Russian showcase is Edson Barboza and Paul Felder. I'm definitely picking Paul Felder. I mean, the Irish Dragon is incredible, incredibly well-rounded, and I feel as though Edson Barboza of late. Don't get me wrong, striking, impeccable striking in terms of skill set. A ferocious athlete, but I don't know. I've just got Paul Felder in this. I fancy Paul Felder only because the guy, his pressure tactics, his come forward style. I'll get behind that all day.
Yeah, I'll get right behind you. I'm also picking Paul Felder, and the reason why I'm picking him is because I'm seeing improvements in Paul Felder. I'm seeing a more patient fighter. I'm seeing somebody that is sticking to a game plan. You know what I mean? And I like the fact that I think that he's going to pressure Edson Barboza. Why? Because Edson Barboza, like you said, is a great athlete. He is a dangerous kicker. We all know that. His timing is impeccable, and he hits really hard. Here's the problem with Edson is that if you get him on his back foot, if you get him backwards, if you get him backpedaling, he doesn't know what to do. So if you can just clinch him up, put him against the cage, and take him down, kind of like what Khabib did, I think there's a recipe for beating him. And I always frown upon fighters that kind of have like a recipe to be beaten. And I think if Paul Felder concentrates on that and he pushes Edson against the cage and keeps him backpedaling, he's going to win. And I think Paul is going to be able to do that with the improvements that he's made, the patience that he's showing. And Edson, I don't really see any improvements. I see the same Edson, although the same Edson is dope as shit. You know what I mean? But I'm not seeing him, stop takedowns as much, or that recipe still exists, but he's so dangerous. And I think Paul is going to pull it off. And I hope he does. I like to see Paul keep improving and get, even higher in the mix of his division.
And finally, Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Dustin Poirier. Now, I'm going to just pause just for 10 seconds and just drop a bomb on you.
Uh-oh. Let me sit down.
We have seen everybody and their efforts in terms of the push-up challenge and getting ready for it. But you know what, G?
What's that?
We haven't seen yours. So you know what I'm going to propose now? We are both going to kick off the push-up challenge, and we're going to start with Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Dustin Poirier. You're going to pick who you feel is going to win, and I'm going to pick who I feel is going to win. And
what if we pick the same person?
Well, we're just about to find out. We're just about to gonna
All right,
find out.
Let's do it. I accept your challenge.
Okay, so I put it to you, ladies first. Who do you feel is going to be the victor?
Oh, such a gentleman, and thank you, because I won't be so kind when you have to do push-ups. I am going with the Eagle, the man. One of the best lightweight in the world to me right now. That's Khabib. I don't think anybody has figured him out. I think that Khabib is going to Khabib him, which means he's going to maul him. I think that Khabib is going to do what he always does. He's going to push Dustin against the cage. He's going to take him down, and he's going to wrap his legs up, and he's going to pummel him. And then I think later in the rounds, he's going to slow down a bit. But I think by that time, Dustin is going to be befuddled by the threats of a takedown like what Khabib did to Conor, and it's going to interrupt his flow. And that's what I'm thinking is going to happen. I could be wrong, because with that being said, if Khabib slows down and Dustin doesn't, he hits hard and he can knock Khabib out. So that's I think Dustin's path to victory. But my money is on Khabib. He's going to maul him and he's going to slow down. But by that time, Dustin's not going to be able to handle, is he going to take me down? Is he slowing down? Is it this and that? And Khabib's going to win. Who are you picking?
That's why I asked you to go first, because I didn't want there to be any ambiguity as to who chose what. Mm-hmm. I had it in my head that, just like everybody else is actually predicting, yourself included, that Khabib was going to walk away with victory. Think about it. Now, I am definitely quite set in my mind, even before even before I laid down the gauntlet just a while ago in terms of the push-up challenge, I'm going with Dustin Poirier for the upset. I'm going for Dustin Poirier for this reason. His striking, I think, will cause Khabib Nurmagomedov problems. Now, you say, probably in your head is probably the question, but he's dealt with strikers in the past. Look at the trajectory of Dustin Poirier as a fighter. And a lot of people are probably pointing to the fact that, his recent outings, really and truly, you cannot deny have been phenomenal. But not only that, the Dustin Poirier, who I remember of old, who faced Conor McGregor, is not the Dustin Poirier who we are looking at now. They are two different people, and we saw that change up in terms of style. We saw that change up in terms of caliber when he faced Max Holloway. And that's what has me pretty certain that he's going to be upsetting the upper cart here. He's going to be stealing victory because of the precision striking, because of the takedown defense that he's got. But I just feel as though the pressure is all on Khabib. His dad is going to be in attendance, and that is, someone obviously who he looks up to, someone who he wants to impress. The crowd obviously going to be behind him. I know, but a lot of people listen to this probably thinking, well, what's the crowd got to do with anything? I mean, when they are actually in the cage, the crowd can't actually help them. I'm talking about build-up, I'm talking about pressure, I'm talking about expectations.
Right.
There is none of this on Dustin Poirier.
Do you think, though, that Khabib handles pressure well? I mean, Khabib was grossly offended by Conor. And the only time he lost it was after he choked Conor out and jumped the cage. But he maintained his game plan. He wanted to toy with Conor. He controlled the fuck out of Conor. And Conor is an elite lightweight. So I don't think his dad being in the crowd or him being at almost home turf has anything to do with his mental focus or what he plans to do. He just seems like a scary dude. And I don't know. You can't break him. I mean, Conor said some horrific things, and it did not do anything.
And that's why, G, you are such a true pro. You have basically set up the final reason and underlining a point for me.
Go ahead.
Look how unflappable he looked on the face of it in the build-up. That disrespect that he was showing, shuck it off. The level of insults, the level of poking of the bear that we saw, shook it off. Underneath that cool, calm exterior, there was obviously rage. There was obviously a build-up to a level where as soon as, the pressure was off, it spilled over.
Lost it, yeah.
So he was definitely feeling the pressure, but he masks it very, very well. Just like he masks, the fact that he was hurt. in the fights where he has actually taken shots to the face, remember, Khabib's striking isn't the best.
No.
So
Improved, but not the best. Yes.
Improved,
Yeah.
But by no means is it on the level of Dustin Poirier. That's why I'm glad that you mentioned about, him actually keeping it together, because you could see the rage in the way that it actually spilled out, that he was struggling to keep that together.
And there is a path to victory for Dustin. I'm not, like when you break down the fight, he can win. It's not one of these fights where I'm like, no, it's not happening. You know what I mean? Like, Dustin can win. Dustin cardio is on point. Khabib gets tired. You know what I mean? But he just knows how to be tired. He knows he knows when to slow down, and he knows when to turn it back up, and he knows, you know what I mean? He knows when to start racking up points and taking you back down and going for the submission. He's very smart. But Dustin is the type of dude that doesn't get tired, and he hits hard. He's not like a knockout artist like a Francis Ngannou in that division. No, but he hits hard. He was smacking Max Holloway across that octagon so much. And did you hear actually what Dustin just said recently in MMA media was that if he beats Khabib, he considers himself the best lightweight of all time because of his stellar record, being that he beat Max Holloway, he beat Eddie Alvarez, and arguably he was beating him in the other fight, when it was a no contest, arguably, and then Justin Gaethje, Anthony Pettis, Jim Miller, like his resume is sick. You know what I mean?
A killer's row.
Right. So that to him, that makes him, he thinks like the GOAT of the lightweight division if he gets by Khabib. I think a GOAT is somebody that defends the title almost like an Anderson Silva or GSP fashion. I'm different, but he considers himself the GOAT if he beats Khabib. How do you feel about that? You agree?
It's a nice narrative, Dustin, but come on. Let's talk about taking a title first, defending that title, then defending it again. And then we might consider you a GOAT. But it's not just about taking names. It's about maintaining your position for me.
As
to
the
be
best.
considered a GOAT.
Yeah. I'm noticing a trend on in MMA, especially in the UFC, and a lot of times I discuss it on MMA Twitter, and I'm just like, what is happening with the culture of the organization where if you beat a high-level opponent that, was really good, or if Dustin beats Khabib, now you're the GOAT, or now Henry beat DJ, so now he's the GOAT, and then he's throwing in his Olympic medal and stuff. I'm like, what's up with like these little, like the fine print at the bottom now that makes you the GOAT? Like, whatever happened to just like you defend your damn title over and over and over again, like GSP and Anderson? It almost feels like, is that old school now? Like, if you just beat somebody that's really good, you the best now? Like, I don't subscribe to that. It's kind of like annoying. It triggers me a little bit online. As much as I ignore it, I'd be like, oh, God, shut up.
You see, I think you've underlined a point which, doesn't get discussed that often when people discuss the GOAT. What's the criteria? What is the agreed criteria that we are all talking to? Because it seems like, just as you said, a lot of people are handing out this GOAT title like sweets. Really and truly, let's just pump those brakes and, assess really what we are collectively talking about.
Right.
What is GOAT? What are we
Because
talking
GOAT
about
to me
here?
is greatest of all time, not like you dope right now. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's, to me, that's Henry Cejudo. He is the king of two divisions right now. When he defends both those bitches over and over and over again, and he cleans out divisions like DJ and GSP, yes, we can call people the GOAT. And then some people take the GOAT card back when it comes to John Jones and Anderson Silva, which breaks my heart because Anderson Silva is my favorite fighter in the whole wide world. And in my biased mind, he's still the GOAT, whether he was juicing or not. But, people take the... No, I'm like so biased when it comes to him. Like the nostalgia that he gives me when I watch him fight. You know what I mean? From back in the day, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's just... I'll never forget that. You know what I mean? So, GOAT or not, he's given me experiences that I can't even articulate to you and how I feel about MMA. But people take his card back because of PEDs, and I'm just like, oh God, is your GOAT status tarnished now because of PEDs? That makes me sad too. So it's like we kind of need like a criteria for GOATs, because it's not just MMA Twitter. You heard Dustin said this himself. I'm the GOAT if I beat the Khabib. Sir, no, you have to defend this belt, maybe fight Khabib again, get your Conor loss back, beat up Tony, and then beat up everybody else that comes after them, and then you get so bored at the top, you resign, or you GSP, I need a break. Like, that's a GOAT, baby. Like, it's not because you beat Khabib. And you know what's so funny, Michael? I'm going off on a tangent, but I think even Khabib doesn't subscribe to this, because just recently Khabib said, I have to fight Tony Ferguson. And he wants to fight GSP. You can tell that he's like, I got to beat up everybody that thinks they're the best. And he's the champion talking like this. I respect his attitude. I like that. That's a GOAT. When he's like, I done beat up the former legend GSP. I beat up Tony. He's on some crazy win streak. I beat up Dustin. And I beat the shit out of Conor. And then he'll defend it a few more times. And then he can get off his throne. I agree with that.
So, what's going to be the agreed forfeit for this then?
I mean, you call it. I mean, I guess right now I'm up to like 20.
Okay, 20 it is then.
Okay, let's do 20. I think my challenge against Ren is 25. And yeah, let's do 20. I'll upload the video. If Dustin knocks out Khabib, I'll do my 20 push-ups in your honor, and I guess I'll eat 20 push-ups of crow for you. But I feel confident. I feel almost like it ain't gonna happen. So I hope you go to the gym tomorrow and start pushing.
Well, you've seen I've already put in work, so I'm almost there.
Listen, I'm working. I'm just not doing no videos like the rest of y'all, but I'm happy to see them. But I am gonna do one. I feel bad, like I'm moderating, but I haven't done one yet.
Exactly. Now, speaking of moderation, I'm guessing that you've moderated a few items of listener mail, so it'd be good to take a bunch.
Of course, I got some
3 out of the bag.
Yeah, I've got some good ones here, and I actually have one that ties into UFC Abu Dhabi, and this is from Man of Mayhem, great guy.
Yeah, I like him.
Yeah, he's
like
cool,
him
right?
a lot.
Yeah.
He is the guy.
Yeah, he's funny, he's polite, and I like his tweets. So he sent us this. Do you think the UFC screws Tony over and gives the winner of Khabib versus Poirier to Conor?
Yes, I do. Because the UFC are in the business of making money. I think they have seen, just like we all have, a slow decline in terms of the eyes on the product, regardless of who they're putting on. People, let's not make no bones about this. People are very much invested in Conor McGregor. Love him or hate him, people are tuning in to watch him either win or to watch him lose. So they want Conor obviously to come back, and I think that is what Conor is waiting for. He's looking for the fallout of what actually happens in this matchup.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you on that as well. And I think we all know this. I think like Conor will get whoever wins that bout, period. And it's just, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not a fan of Conor because of his shenanigans outside of the cage. And I also don't feel like the journeyman is still around. That's who I fell in love with, and he seems to be gone. But with that being said, the moment he steps into an octagon, I'm locked in and I'm watching, because I think he's a really great fighter and he entertains me. However, I don't want to see him fight Khabib. And that's another reason why I'm rooting for Khabib to win, because I think it's going to be a better fight for Khabib to fight Tony. I'm not really interested in Conor fighting Khabib. And then Conor Poirier, they can run it back, but it's not as like tantalizing as Khabib versus Tony Ferguson. But I do think that he's going to skip the line and they're going to give it to him because of the fan base, the money he generates, the shits and giggles, the noise and the money. Because what is this, an entertainment business? But I hope not. You just never know. Maybe, Michael, think about it. Conor has to win. And I think not only does he have to win for his career, but for his brand. I think that's why he came out with that apology just recently. I think like he realized that his brand was going to take a hit. And if he loses another fight, his brand, it's not going to look good. So I don't know if he just wants to jump back into Khabib and Poirier either, you know? I think he should have taken the cowboy fight or something that's more winnable for him, and then fight like the title, you know, for the title. But we'll see how it goes. But he's fighting as soon as this is over with, and one of them wins. Like he's getting that title shot. So.
Oh, definitely.
Oh.
What else you got?
Let's see. Let's switch to Bellator. This is from Joe Bloggs 74. He's in the push-up challenge, and he's a really cool dude. He said, since Scott Coker said Bader is the best heavyweight on the planet, do you think we will start to see cross-promotion fights between the UFC, Bellator, and other organizations?
100% no for cross-promotion between Bellator and UFC. I think between other promotions, yes, definitely. We've seen it already with Ryzen. But just on that statement, let's just remember who's saying this. With all due respect to Scott Coker, he's a promoter. He is there to promote his brand.
Right.
And, saying statements like that is Scott Coker doing his job. So I don't see cross-promotion between the UFC and Bellator ever happening. But I do see Bellator cross-promoting with other promotions because, as I say, it's begun already.
I agree with you, but sometimes I don't know. I never thought the UFC would do trades. Like when I woke up one morning and I found out that DJ had been traded for Ben Askren, I was like, since when? Like, when did the UFC engage in trading fighters? So that kind of gave me a shimmer of hope. But even though it's a shimmer of hope, I agree with you. I don't think we'll ever see something like that. But I think that would be so much fun to kind of see, like Ryan Bader versus like Stipe or something. Or, it would be so much fun to kind of get some of these cross promotions, or Juan Archuleta and like Pitbull fighting people in the UFC, Douglas Lima. Like, oh my God, that would be like a dream come true. But I don't think it's going to happen. And quite frankly, I don't know why. I'm not a promoter. But Joe, I'm going to have to say no. And I think, Michael, you don't think so either. Ready for the next one?
Last but by no means least, who have we got?
Okay. This is probably one of my favorite people on MMA, my favorite guy friends, Guy Shook, 79. He's also my Twitter lawyer. Yeah, this is the attorney. And you're my attorney as well, but you are my alternate. Guy is the number one. So Guy Shook said, with Colby donning MAGA hats, Cejudo putting diapers on belts, Nate, well, being Nate, do you think that this anti-hero era is a byproduct of the UFC's lack of star promotion? And do you think it's good or bad for the sport?
I don't think that it's the UFC that's actually engineering these personalities. They're looking at ways in which they can actually expand their brands. Their brands as fighters is something which they are in sole charge of. No one's there dictating the pacing in terms of, telling them what to do. So I think the anti-hero is a route in which people have actually decided to go because, controversy sells, controversy actually gets people talking. And especially when you look at, the lengths to which, that whole diaper thing, as much as people hate it, as much as people cringe, had people talking. So when you think about it, I really do feel it's got nothing to do with the lack of star power. I think it's just, fighters themselves finally realizing we have to do something different in order to set ourselves out from the pack and get what we want based on our popularity. And one way in which you actually deal with popularity, expand popularity, fan the flames of popularity, is actually do something which other people aren't doing.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's lack of star power. I just think that self-promotion is huge because the UFC is not doing it. Do you know what I mean? Like, it is totally your responsibility to sell pay-per-view seats. And I do agree that people are talking. I'm one of them. Like, Henry Cejudo just, like, that cringe stuff triggers me as well. And my followers, I always joke about it. Like, I even said that, I probably need to talk to my therapist about this. Like, it drives me crazy. But you also have to remember, people are talking, but sometimes these folks are not buying seats, though. We're just talking about it on MMA Twitter. Like, for instance, Colby, he doesn't sell because of his fighting style. Like, some of the gates when he's the main event, like UFC Newark, was pretty low. People outside of hardcores are not really familiar with Sahiro, even though he's screaming and yelling and coming out of women's bathrooms. So I think like they are doing that to sell seats. They need that star power. And like you said, you can barter with it when it's time to negotiate. If you sell seats like Conor, you can lose a fight and then fight for the title and sit on your butt and tweet like Zeus. You know what I mean? Like you can do stuff like that when you sell. And I think they see fighters doing that and they self-promote. As far as do I think it's good or bad for the sport? I think it's good when it's pulled off well. When somebody is a heel, but it's selling and not just triggering or annoying or funny to people that just find it humorous. If it sells and it's getting people to buy seats, I think it's good. But I do think sometimes it's bad for the sport because some people kind of copy people's style like Conor and it kind of gets corny. But ultimately, people are watching and enjoying this. So, I'm not going to complain too much.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I'm not going to complain too much because the sport is thriving and I need it to thrive so that I can watch it every Saturday. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
I'm not going to complain
100%.
too much. Right. And I've learned to just control myself too as far as being triggered and popping off because I see somebody putting a diaper on a belt. Like, come on, Michael. Like, didn't one of them have like fake poop in it too or something? I turned that shit off so quick. I was like, nah, this is Michael, I ain't even gonna front. I was like, this shit ain't for me. I turned it off. I said, nah, I'm good.
Okay, well, that wraps up this episode of the Wocast. As usual, you can find me on Twitter at MikeWoTV, and you can find G at
G from WoTV.
Now, if there are any subjects at which we've started in terms of debates, discussion points, items which you want to continue talking to us about, you can find us on Twitter. Until then, make some trouble.
Always. See you later.